Strange Brew Podcast, Season 1, Episode 341. It is the Groundhog Day episode.
Then put your little hand in mine. There ain't no hill or mountain we can't climb. Babe, I got you, babe. I got you, babe.
Okay, campers, rise and shine, and don't forget your booties, 'cause it's cold out there.
It's cold out there every day. What is this, Miami Beach?
Not hardly.
Not hardly. That's when I knew I wanted to be a radio DJ. That clip from that movie when I saw it in 1994. What is this, Miami Beach? It's a Groundhog Day Monday. We finally got out of the deep freeze here in southeastern Wisconsin. That was nice over the weekend. 25, never felt more 65 in my life. Well, we'll get after it here on a Monday, and essentially what we're going to do today is probably what we would call a mailbag episode. We've had a couple of emails that I haven't gotten to on the Strange Brew email, strangebrewpod@aol.com, all one word, strangebrewpod@aol.com. There was a Packer hypothetical weeks ago that we just never got to because other things were going on. I've got 3 emails I want to get to as it relates to the Bucks and Giannis and the trade deadline on Thursday, things like that. And I've got one lifestyle email that I am both sad and happy I can give advice on this. Hopefully I can help this young man out. I guess young man, he's 31. I'm 41, so there's not that big of a gap, I suppose. But I want to give out some advice to our buddy Brett, who is going through a follicle lifestyle change. I guess we'll call it. We'll talk about that, too. That was an email on the strangebrewpod@aol.com email address. We'll also talk a little bit about the Bucks losing to Boston, got blown out on Sunday. They haven't won since Giannis went down. We are in full Panzer mode, full tank mode. Trade deadline is Thursday. Is this the last podcast we record where Giannis is a Milwaukee Buck? I would say 50-50. I'm saying no, but I acknowledge I could be 1,000% wrong on that. I think they'll wait till the offseason, but that's going to be the topic the entire week. We've got the Super Bowl on the way this coming weekend. Friday will be prop bet day. You know, we've done that over the years. We go through some of the bigger prop bets and where we land on that, so that'll be Friday. But today, just a little on the Bucks, a little Badger basketball, too. They got a win over the weekend, and then we've got a mailbag episode. Let's go.
On the ground, a chance here. Durham to Hardy to first. Hit time! Yes! The Brewers win! Yes!
Here comes Melvin to the 25, to the 20, Gordon 15, 10, 5, touchdown! Wisconsin! Record-breaking run!
Morgan, a smash up the middle. Face into center. Here comes Gomez. Around third. A throw, and the Brewers win.
Here's the snap. He looks, he throws, and and there is your Super Bowl dagger!
Booker the drive, gets inside, leans in, knocked away and stolen by Holiday. Phoenix has to foul on a pinnacle ball, throws it down. Swinging fly ball in the right center. Broxton is there, and they're the champions. They have done it. It's been a 50-year journey. Wisconsin, we've got a room at the top of the world tonight. The Milwaukee Bucks are NBA champions.
Yeah, welcome in Monday morning, Groundhog Day Monday. Let me play one more clip from Groundhog Day. We're going to have to pay Universal a bunch
There's
of fees.
no way that this winter is ever going to end. As long as this groundhog keeps seeing his shadow, I don't see any other way out. He's got to be stopped.
That's kind of how we were feeling after day 9 last week of 3-degree high temperatures, wind chills of 20 below.
There is no way that this winter is ever going to end.
But we kind of got out of it over the weekend. We had, for B93, we had the Sheboygan Falls Fire Department Broad Fry yesterday. It was the 46th annual. I have been broadcasting live since the 29th annual, so let that sink in. How's that hit you? Doesn't hit me well. We enjoy it every year, but it's hard to fathom. We've been a part of that many of them, but that's every weekend in between championship weekend in the NFL and the Super Bowl. That's when they have it to avoid any football conflicts. And that's where we were yesterday, but it was nice, man. We had single-digit temperatures and sub-zero wind chills for literally 8 or 9 days in a row. 22 on Saturday. My God, did it feel good. 27 when we got to the Broad Fry. And as I was heading home yesterday afternoon, 31 degrees. with the sun out, and it felt like spring. And we are starting to get a little light now, late in the day. That is one nice thing, even though January drags on and February is the shortest month, but I'm sure that's going to drag on. But we get, in the month of February, we get 70 minutes of daylight for this area of the state by the end of the month, from now until the end of the month. And we are now past a 5 o'clock sunset, so we're getting there. My God, we're getting there, everybody. Groundhog Day, one last Groundhog Day clip, because I know we mentioned this on the podcast, I think, last year. This is maybe one of my favorite clips that we've ever blogged about, that I've ever played on the air. It takes us to Jimmy. Don't touch Jimmy. Jimmy the Sun Prairie Groundhog in 2015, on Groundhog Day 2015. I don't think this guy's even the mayor. In fact, I think we're several mayors removed now from the mayor that got his ear bit on Groundhog Day 2015. But the video and the still shot of Jimmy the Groundhog chomping into the mayor's left ear will never not make me laugh. And I don't know, do they do that with Punxsutawney Phil? We're on the air generally when all of these things are happening on TV broadcasts for Groundhog Day at Gobbler's Knob or whatever they call it. That's what it's called, right? It sounds like something else, but I think that's what it's called. Isn't that what it's called? Gobbler's Knob? We'll get our producer to work on that. But when they're doing all the Groundhog Day festivities, we're on the air doing whatever it is the hell we do. So I never really get a chance to see it. I think it is you see your shadow, it's 6 more weeks of winter. Don't see your shadow, we get an early spring. But do they always hold the groundhog up to the mayor or whoever is hosting the event? Do they always hold it up to the ear? And I just remember when you see this video, you can see it in Jimmy's eye. Jimmy's been planning this since the last Groundhog Day when he didn't do it. He chickened out of biting his ear, and he spent the whole year plotting, if they put me up next to that guy's ear next year, I am chomping down on that ear.
He says that...
I mean, this is not a love bite. This is not a nibble. This is a full-on Mike Tyson.
He says that...
Just see it in his eye. You can see him say, a little bit closer. Just a little bit closer. Get Jimmy a little bit closer.
He says that he...
Everybody laughing at the mayor.
And so it... thank you. It'll be an early spring.
Everybody laughing except the mayor. He didn't start bleeding. I mean, this was a chomp. I do have to give credit. I don't know who this mayor is, but he did maintain his composure there. Poise counts. He did maintain his composure the entire time he was getting his ears snacked on like it was a part of a charcuterie board for Jimmy the Groundhog. And then Jimmy the Groundhog spent the rest of his year on a nice farm out in the country. And there was a different Jimmy next. Is it the same Jimmy? Oh, yeah. This is the same Jimmy. Jimmy went out a hero. I'm sure in the groundhog circles, from Punxsutawney Phil to, what's the Illinois one? Gertie the Groundhog. I know they've got one in Wyoming. They've got General Beauregard Lee in Georgia. That's a real thing. Google that. I learned that this morning. That's the groundhog in Georgia, Beauregard Lee. I'm sure in the groundhog circle, news of Jimmy spread. Did you hear Jimmy in Sun Prairie? He bit the mayor. Oh, my God, he did it. Jimmy talked about doing it, but he did. I'll be goddamned if he didn't bite him. So I'm sure that was big news. And he's probably a hero, some kind of idol god in the groundhog world. Jimmy the Groundhog, 2015. Every year we do a show on Groundhog Day. Every year I play that clip. Every year I laugh. And then the still image is even better. But welcome into your Monday. So as I said, I've got 5 emails I want to get through, and some of them have kind of been languishing in the email here for a while. We just got sidetracked with a bunch of stuff at the end of the Packers season, and with baseball trades. Freddie got, some stuff had been happening when I intended to get to some of these, but just never did. So we're going to kind of do a mailbag episode. I guess we'll just start. Well, let's just talk about the Badgers real quick. Nice win over Ohio State over the weekend, 92-82. John Blackwell was good. Nick Boyd was good again. It's a win at home, a win you should get, even though Ohio State 14-6 going into that game, little under 500 a game, under 500 in conference. Not a terrible team, but not the Ohio State that we've seen in years past. But they get the job done. Put 92 on the board. So you got the come-from-behind win against Minnesota on Wednesday. You get the 10-point win against Ohio State on Saturday. If they just didn't fumble that USC game a Sunday ago, they'd have a 8-game winning streak, and they'd be a top 25, maybe top 20 team today. But they get the win. They are 16-6, 8-3 in the Big Ten. Now, do I think that they're going to threaten for a Big Ten regular season championship or a 1 or a 2 seed? No, but they could maybe get in the double bye conversation. The top of the Big Ten is loaded. You've got a top 5 team in Michigan. You've got a top 10 team in Illinois. Nebraska, which lost to Illinois yesterday at home, just their second loss of the year, though. They're a top 10 team. Michigan State's a top 10 team. Purdue is a fringe top 10 team. And then you've got Wisconsin. So you've got Michigan, Illinois 10-1, Nebraska, Michigan State 9-2. Purdue and Wisconsin 8-3, and right now Purdue has the tiebreak because they beat the Badgers head-to-head. But once again, Greg Gard, much maligned, and the fire Gard gauge that we often put up once in a while on the Facebook page, where do we fire Greg Gard or do we keep Greg Gard? Tough night for the Greg Gard for the fire Gard crew or big night for the fire Gard crew? He just churns out 20 wins a year and above 500 in conference, it feels like, every year, and an NCAA tournament team, and sometimes they're a 2, 3, 4 seed, and they're out in the second round, and sometimes they're a 6, 7, 8 seed, and they're out in the second round. They're always out in the second round, though. Always consistent there. And I guess ultimately, that's the number one knock on Gard and his tenure for the Badgers is, yeah, they win 20 games or 22 or 23 games a year, and they win 12 or 13 Big Ten games, and sometimes they're more toward the top, and sometimes they're more toward just above the middle, but they never seem to be able to put together a deep tournament run, which is fair, but man, he just churns out a consistent winner all the time. So they are 16-6, 8-3 in the Big Ten. They are off all week, so they are at Indiana, and Indiana's not having a great year, but that's coming up on Saturday, so they have off from, did they play on, yeah, so they have a full week off. So they do not play again until at Indiana, and they're not a bad team, 15-7, 6-5 in the Big Ten. And we know that's a tough place to play, but that's next up. That is on Saturday. We'll talk more about that on the Friday podcast. But then you do get some pretty big tests. After that, you are at number 9 Illinois, and I assume they're going to be more a top 5 team after getting that win against Nebraska. Then you're at home 3 days later with number 7 Michigan State. Then you've got to go to Ohio State. And I always say, from a gambling perspective, when you look at college basketball lines, if a team beat another team at home and they play a second time at the other team's place, that's always tough to sweep them, especially when the second game is on the road. And then you're home with Iowa, at Oregon, at Washington, home with Maryland, and you wrap up at number 12 Purdue. So not an easy schedule to end the year. They've been able to pile up some wins here at a softer part of the schedule. I would guess they're going to be like, so they're 8-3 right now. I would guess they're going to be 13-7 probably in Big Ten play and probably have 23 wins, and they're probably going to be a 5 or 6 seed come tournament time. And like we've discussed, until we get to baseball, I mean, the Giannis subplot is big right now in the NBA, and whether or not he's going to be a Buck, and there could be a seismic move for the Bucks franchise in the next 72 hours or less. But this is the only hope we have of any entertainment value. We've got the Super Bowl this weekend, and then we're just in the wilderness until we get to spring training in 3 or 4 weeks, and regular season baseball still like 2 months away. Badger basketball, we need you. They might be, I don't think the rankings are out yet. That loss to USC hurt because they went from just outside of the top 25 to barely being in the others receiving votes category. I think they got 2 votes in the AP and a vote maybe in the coaches poll after that, so they still appear on that list. But had they beaten USC and had then they won against Indiana or won against Minnesota and then yesterday or on Saturday, they would have been top 20, 19, 18 in the country probably today. But they might slot in right at number 25 today. So that was a nice win, 10-point win over Ohio State for Greg Gard and the boys on Saturday. Now, the Bucks yesterday, I mean, this team is just horrible. They are so bad. They were at Boston yesterday. Again, no Giannis. He's out for at least another month. And Doc talked to the ESPN. This was a Black History Month. They called it the first ever. It's the Pioneer Game, I think they're calling it, where they honor some of the first African-American black players in the NBA. And they did that in Boston yesterday. So the Bucks were a part of that, the first ever Pioneer Game. And that was in Boston on Sunday afternoon on national TV. So, of course, on national TV, and Doc Rivers has never spent a moment near a national TV camera or mic when he did not want to be on that. So he talked to the ESPN crew pregame. Of course, the number one question is, where do you stand with Giannis? And Doc told the company line and said what he's always said. Giannis has always said he wants to be here, and he loves it in Milwaukee, and I can't wait for the deadline to be over. I think that was Doc's quote was, my favorite day will be the day after the deadline. Now, I don't know if he's saying that because that means whatever happens, we'll at least have a resolution, or if he means that to say, by the time we get to Friday, Giannis will still be here, and this will all have been rumor and conjecture like it always is. I don't know what he was hinting at. Maybe he's just going to be happy if it's done either way. But he did mention that on the national telecast. Yeah, Giannis has said all the right things. He loves being here. He loves Milwaukee. So I don't know what else you want him to say. But he did talk to the NBA Countdown crew before the game on Sunday. And the Bucks went out there without Giannis after a month. And Doc said, too, that he expects him back at some point to play this year. Again, would that be for the Bucks or would that be for somebody else? He did not specify. I assume he was saying that within the context of he would play for the Bucks again this year. But at this point, that looks like it would be just a waste of miles on Giannis's tires. Unless you felt like if we get past the deadline on Thursday and we are then still on target to maybe trade Giannis in the offseason. Maybe if he's healthy by early to mid-March, you'd want him to play in a handful of games just to prove he's healthy. But that, again, feels like a waste. This team is not going to be sniffing a play-in tournament spot, let alone a playoff spot, by the time Giannis gets back. They lose again. They jumped out on a 12-0 run. I was listening to the broadcast on my way back from the fire department broad fry, and Brian Rollins knocks down a 3, and Bobby Portis makes a shot, and Rollins hits another. Oh, my God, they seem to be kind of rolling here, and I'm conflicted. I'm listening to this, and I'm kind of excited because they're playing good early, and I hate Boston, but I am kind of conflicted like we talked about a few podcasts ago. It's been a little bit. It's been more than a decade, well better than a decade, probably since 2013. And the tank year where they won 15 games, Giannis' rookie year, just to try to get the number 1 pick and ultimately either get Wiggins or Jabari, and they got Jabari Parker, and it didn't work out. But whatever. That's the last time we were really rooting for this team to lose. But it is a tough spot to be in if you're a diehard fan of a team, which I am for the Bucks. I know not everybody is. But it is a weird spot to be in again where you know it's better for the franchise for them to lose. I know this. In my right mind, I know that this is the move they have to make if they have any hope of getting competitive, whether Giannis stays or goes. You need to get as high of a draft pick this year as you possibly can. I know that, but it's hard not to root for them and get excited when they're playing well. And by the time Boston called an early timeout in the first quarter, it's 12-0 Bucks. I'm thinking, well, if they win this, they're 19-28, and then who knows? If you could beat Boston, you could beat other teams, and then maybe they get hot, and then Giannis comes back. So I was doing that. That's all it took was one 12-0 run from my stupid brain and my idiot heart to start putting things together. Well, they could get back to 9 games under 500 today if they win 3 or 4 in a row, or they win 5 of their next 6, and the bottom of the East is bad. And then if Giannis comes back earlier than we anticipated. So all of that was going through my brain. Luckily, within 5 minutes of coming back from that first time out for the Celtics, it was clear the Bucks were not going to win this game, and it was just an anomaly the way they started it. And the Celtics boat race them. It was tied at the end of 1. They were up by 14 at halftime, and the Celtics won 107-79. 79, not just the lowest point total this year for the Bucks. It is the lowest output since 2018 for Milwaukee. Ryan Rollins looked good. I don't know, man. I mean, is there anything you want on this team anymore? I don't know. Maybe Rollins. 25 points, 10 of 16 shooting. Kuzma at 16. They were the only 2 in double figures as the Bucks fall to 18-29. Now, they've got to stay hot, and by hot, I mean cold, if they really want to make up ground. They are still right now, if the season ended today and we were just ordering the draft based on worst record from bottom to top, they would have the 7th overall pick. As we said a few podcasts ago, the nature of the draft lottery is, doesn't matter where you fit based on record heading into the lottery. You could move up a few spaces. You could move down a few spaces. We've seen it each way. But if you just ordered the draft right now based on record, the Bucks would have the 7th overall pick. But there's a pretty sizable gap between 1 through 4 or 5 and 5 through 7. So they would have to lose a lot, and they seem committed to doing that, honestly. They have not won since Giannis went down. They've lost 8 of their last 9, 9 of their last 11 overall. I mean, they were kind of, in early January, they were within 4 games of 500 after beating Sacramento on the road, and they got that win against LA, and things looked like they were okay at 17-21, but they are now 18-29, a season worst, 11 games under 500. So that does bring us to Giannis, and I don't think that I have anything new. We've got some emails on this, but I don't think I have anything new to add other than Shams again was reporting over the weekend that Giannis's camp would prefer this to get done by the deadline, but if not, they're willing to wait for the summer. And the Bucks, it sounds like, are not only actively listening to offers, but also presenting counter offers, which does make it feel to me, if that's true, it does feel to me like they are more engaged as it relates to a trade. If you were just collecting data, you were just trying to find out what other teams would put together, that's one thing. But then when you respond when you send the text back, when you answer the text, and you have something to say about would this work, would that work, would you add this, then I think we're having more tangible discussions. But it's sad that are we 72? So Monday to Tuesday, Tuesday to Wednesday, Wednesday to Thursday. So we are 5 hours on top of 77 hours from right now as we record this. The Giannis Era in Milwaukee could be over. I can't believe it. Even though I know this team is bad and he's 31 years old and he's on the back half of his prime, and there is some element to when there's smoke, there's fire with all of the rumors that have happened. Even though I don't believe a ton of them from ESPN, there's got to be a little bit of meat on the bone there. It is hard for me to believe that we are 77 hours away from maybe the Giannis Era just being over. And I'm not going to say, this isn't like the Andy Bernard at the end of The Office where I wish we were in the good times. I wish you knew when you were in the good times. I knew I was in the good times, and we talked about it often on the podcast, on the air. I celebrated all the regular season wins. I went to as many games as I could. I soaked in every second of that title run in 2021, so I don't think I missed anything, but it is still incredible to think that it could be over. I mean, we could be 3 days away, and we could never see Giannis in a Bucks jersey again since he's hurt. You've got 2 games left until the deadline, but you might never see Giannis in a Bucks jersey again. Now, outside of the Giannis subplot, which, as I said in the teaser, I am sticking with, if we were on, what's the odds betting thing? I haven't gotten onto it yet, but it's going to happen. Kalshi, is that what it is? Kalshi, where you can bet futures markets on all sorts of stuff. And it's all, you invest $1 or like, it would be, is Giannis going to get traded? The price for the stock is 85 cents. That means there's a high likelihood he could get traded. So you invest $1 for every 85 cents, and then if it does happen, you get the 15 cents back on top of that. Kalshi is hot in the streets right now. It's astounding. I have not gotten into it yet, but it'll happen. It's going to happen at some point. But I think the odds are that he would not be a Buck by the end of this. But I'm just going with, I think if this happens, and I'm not ruling out, if we get past Thursday, I'm not ruling out that once you get to the summer and we know what the draft order is and the Bucks might have a top 5 pick, it's a deep, talented draft. Giannis might see a young ascending star coming to join him. You can trade Kuzma, you fire Doc, or he can fail upwards into the front office. You hire a good young head coach that Giannis likes. You have the mid-level exception you can sign somebody to. You have the BAE exception you can sign somebody to, so you're not without money this offseason. This was always going to be a gap year, I guess, ultimately. They were trying to avoid it by waiving and stretching Dame's contract and making the move for Miles Turner and trying to do something to entice Giannis to want to stay. But since Giannis has been hurt, I mean, we ultimately end up in the gap year. What would be interesting is, now we're going to have a timeline question here coming up in a second, but when you go back now to the decision to waive Dame Lillard and extend his contract and pay it off over a longer period of time to stretch it, if you now, when you look back, if you knew then that Giannis was going to be hurt a bunch and none of the moves, Miles Turner really hasn't worked out. He's been playing better since Giannis has been down, but it really has not worked out. A lot of the other stuff hasn't worked out either. If you knew all of that and you knew this was going to be a 25-win year and Giannis was going to be on and off the floor with injury and the Miles Turner thing wasn't going to work out anyway, I almost wonder if they just would have stuck with Dame then and had him rehab and just spend the year not playing and then coming back the year after that, and you would have had Dame and Giannis back for 1 year. Not that that worked anyway. The first 2 years of Dame and Giannis, and injuries played a lot into that. But I do wonder now, if you could go back and redo that, would you redo it and just say, okay, Dame's not playing this year, and we're just going to see what we can do with what we have, and we're going to treat this as a gap year, because essentially that's what they're doing now anyway. But anyway, I feel like Giannis is going to be with the Bucks on Friday. That could just be my stupid heart, which was talking itself into the Bucks making a playoff run when they were up 12-0 on the Celtics. That could just be my heart. But I think it's 50-50. I do lean towards Giannis still being a Buck on Friday. And if they are to trade him and make this massive franchise move, I think they'll wait until the offseason, assess where they are in the draft, assess where the other offers are, where they land in the draft, what kind of collateral you could have coming back, what you decide to do with the coaching staff. You can just make a much more informed decision once you get to June, as opposed to pulling the trigger here in the next 2 or 3 days. We're going to talk more about that in a second. Now, I will say this, as it relates to the deadline. Regardless of Giannis, take Giannis out of the equation and whether he's going to stay or go. Everybody on this team is for sale for me beyond him. I know some people are going to say, not Ryan Rollins, not Kevin Porter Jr., not A.J. Green. I mean, there's a handful of players that I think some Bucks fans would say we do not want to move on from Rollins or KPJ or AJ Green. I think those are the three, right? I mean, I can't think of anybody else on this team that any Bucks fan is clamoring to keep. Ryan Rollins, to me, if you made me pick one guy on this team not named Giannis to try to keep as you build going forward, he's only 23 years old. He seems to only be getting better. He's averaging 17 per. It's a career year for him, and he's on a super friendly contract. They signed him to a 3-year, $11 million deal, like total. So he's getting paid $2.5 million a year, and he's 23, and he seems to have some years where he can grow still and get better every year. He's a two-way player. He's a pretty good defender for his size. He's been hitting the three now, hitting 40%. He, to me, if you said pick one guy, keep him. But in my opinion, everybody's for sale at the deadline. And now you do have to treat this, again, regardless of what Giannis wants to do, you have to treat this as we're having a fire sale. This has to be a fire sale. If you have any pieces that anybody wants and you can get any draft capital for them, do it. That includes everyone. I would trade Kevin Porter Jr., even though he's hurt and I don't know what kind of value he has. I guess AJ Green would be the only other one where I would think, well, you just signed him to a 4-year, $45 million extension. He's shooting 43% from beyond the arc. It doesn't feel like he's involved, though, which is another reason why it's probably time to move on from Doc. You pay AJ Green $45 million over 4 years. In the context of the NBA, that is not a huge deal. But you go out and you extend this undrafted rookie free agent who you have cultivated into being a really good shooter, 42, 43% from beyond the arc. And there are games where it feels like he's not getting a shot. Now, is that on A.J. Green or is that on Doc Rivers and the coaching staff not scheming anything up to get him open or get him involved? It's probably a little of both. But he would be the only other guy. But if they traded him and they got something nice coming back or they got good draft capital coming back, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. So I would say everybody. If somebody wants Bobby, I think Bobby's a commodity for some team out there because he does give you a scoring punch off the bench. His rebounding's been better. He's never going to be a good defender. He's still only 29 or 30 years old. He's averaging 14 per. He's a guy who can be like a microwave off the bench and give you a good boost of scoring off the bench that I think any team would want that thinks it can make a run. If somebody offers you something for Miles Turner, I would take that too. It is clear that this has not worked. Maybe Miles Turner with a different coach next year could be a little bit different. I don't understand why he looks so much worse with the Bucks than he did with Indiana. It felt like a natural fit, sort of like Dame felt like a natural fit, and that didn't work. But a stretch five like Miles who can block shots and knock down threes, it felt like he was a younger, more athletic version of Brook Lopez. And Brook Lopez thrived with this franchise next to Giannis for a long time. But for some reason, it just has not worked when they're both on the floor. As I said, he's been better when Giannis has not been on the floor. He scored 31 in Philly, scored 21 and 14, had 6 blocks against Washington. He was okay yesterday as well, just didn't put up big points against Boston. But if somebody offered you something, offered you a first-round pick for Miles Turner, I'm moving on from him too. I'm cutting bait less than a year after he signs a 4-year, $120 million deal in Milwaukee. Everybody is for sale, maybe with the exception of Ryan Rollins. Get whatever you can. Expiring contracts that you can get off the books this offseason, draft capital, first or second round picks, whatever that you can turn into something else later or use this year. Whatever you can get for everybody, probably not named Ryan Rollins, they need to explore that, regardless of what's happening with the Giannis situation. And especially if you are trading Giannis on Thursday, then you need to move on from everybody. So, with that said, let's get into a little bit of a mailbag episode here. And I actually this took me 17 hard-earned minutes of work, or hard-worked minutes for Midwest Communications. A little mailbag intro.
You've got mail.
But you remember this. When you control the mail, you control information.
Mail time!
Mailed it.
No, but I'm talking about like mail.
Stupid junk mail.
Not bad, huh? All right. We're going to have to pay those copyrights down, too. It's an expensive episode. So we've got 3 on Giannis. 1 is a little more in-depth, and 2 a little more toward the side. I've got a Packer email I want to get to, and then, as I said, I've got an email from a longtime listener of the morning show who apparently has just kind of picked up the podcast in the last few months or so and has a question for somebody talking into this mic right now who went through many years ago what he is going through right now. I kind of feel like George Costanza. I'm honored that I can be a part of this. So the first email is from our buddy Brandon in Sheboygan. He said, John, the first mistake the Bucks made, was firing Bud. Should never have done that. Should never have traded Drew. The Dame thing never worked out. That's where this all started to fall apart. I know we've talked about this. I mean, I don't disagree with you to an extent, and I know there are a lot of Bucks fans that have the same sentiment that Brandon does, that when you look back now at the last 3 years, and now we could be knocking on the door of Giannis getting traded in 3 days, it's easy to look back and say they should have done nothing. So that's the alternate timeline that Brandon is suggesting. So 2023, it's not that long ago. It feels like it's a long time ago. 2023, the Bucks had the best record in the NBA. And all roads to a championship went through Milwaukee. They were the number 1 seed in the East. They were the number 1 overall seed. If they would have gotten to the finals that year, they would have had home court in the finals as well. And then we know what happened. You end up in the 1-8 matchup with Miami, which when you look back at that, Miami was fighting for their lives in the play-in tournament, had to rally against, I think, the Bulls in a play-in tournament game where if the Bulls just hit a couple more jumpers in that game in particular, the Heat are never even in the playoffs, and maybe we don't end up on the timeline we're on. Well, that's the way it goes. So the Heat become the 8th seed. They win the play-in tournament, or they win that last spot. So 1-8 matchup, Bucks and Heat. And we know what happened there. I mean, the Heat just went crazy. Jimmy Butler went nuts. He went prime Michael Jordan, not just for that series, but basically all the way until Game 4 or 5 in the finals that year against Denver. It wasn't just the Bucks he torched. Every level of the Eastern Conference Finals until he ran out of gas a bit against Denver by Game 3 or 4 in the finals. He was going crazy, just knocking down insane shots, mid-range jumpers, rallying the team, hitting threes, 27% three-point shooter that year. He was shooting like Reggie Miller the entire playoff run. And the Bucks end up losing that in 6. Was it in 6 games or 5? It might have been 5 games. It was a historic upset based on the 8 over the 1, based on the gambling odds heading into it, based on the fact that the Bucks were not just the 1 seed in the East, but the number 1 seed overall. And then at the end of that year, we all know what happened. They end up firing Bud. They hire Adrian Griffin, who went 30-13. That was another subplot this week, was Jay Crowder, who was on that team with Griffin and then Doc. He claims that the team did not hate Adrian Griffin. That team was 30-13. I know we discussed this a podcast or two ago, and Griffin was fired because they weren't beating bad teams by enough. Like, that's how good things were going, and now think of where we are. But they were winning games. I think they had the best record in the Eastern Conference, or second best record in the Eastern Conference at 30-13. And the gripe was they're barely beating bad teams. We'd kill to beat a bad team now. We are a bad team. And then there was the discussion of was there a mutiny in the locker room? It felt like that they weren't on the same page as AG. The players didn't love it. Jay Crowder seemed to refute that. Jay Crowder seemed to hint that it was not that at all behind the scenes, and that the team was upset that Griffin was fired and that they parachute Doc Rivers in, and Doc had kind of been hanging around the team. That was not a well-kept secret, that he had been advising Adrian Griffin, and then he ends up stabbing him in the back and taking his job, basically, and no one's heard from Adrian Griffin again. But they fire Bud, they go to Griffin. Then a few months later, they make the huge trade that involves Drew, and they bring in Damian Lillard, and that doesn't work out, and Giannis gets hurt at the end of the season that year, doesn't play in the playoffs. Dame gets hurt the year after that with the blood clots, and then the Achilles tear, and now he's out for the year. And it just never coalesced. It never came together. And it's easy now with what Brandon said to go back and say they should never have done that. They should never have fired Bud. The alternate timeline is everybody takes a deep breath within the organization and says, you know what? Jimmy Butler went prime Michael Jordan for 2 months. He didn't just torch us. He torched 2 other teams and almost led that team, which didn't have the talent, to a title. Let's just take a beat. We had the best record in the NBA. Couple things didn't go our way. A guy got red hot. Let's stick with it. Let's take a deep breath and let's stick with Bud. Let's stick with the Drew, Middleton, Giannis trio, and Brook, the core 4 as they called them. And let's go into 23-24. And as the team that just had the best record in the NBA, let's see if we can win 50-plus games again and have a better matchup in the playoffs. They could have done that. I don't disagree that now with hindsight, okay, it would have been interesting to see how that would have played out, and we'll never know. I don't think we're in any different of a spot right now, honestly. I honestly don't think we are. Because ultimately the thing that undermines this team and this franchise, it isn't even the Giannis injuries or the Dame injuries or the fact that the Giannis-Dame combo just didn't quite find the chemistry we thought that it would. What doesn't change if you don't change anything after that year and you just go forward with Bud and Lopez and Middleton and Drew and Giannis, what does not change heading into the next year is that Chris Middleton's body is breaking down. And I think ultimately, whatever happens this week with Giannis at the trade deadline and however this era of Bucks basketball ends, I think ultimately that is the biggest problem that this franchise had. Because Middleton and Giannis had hive mind. They had played together since 2013. Middleton knew exactly what he had to do to get Giannis involved, and Giannis knew that Middleton could bail him out with big jumpers and mid-range jumpers and game-winning shots when the nuts were on the line and you needed a jumper. Middleton was the guy to go to, and they just worked so well like Batman and Robin. And the problem was Middleton's body started breaking down, and he was never the same. I mean, you go back to the year after the title, 2022, the year after they win the title. And I think they end up being the 2 or 3 seed again that year. They play the Bulls in the first round. They win that series easily, win that in 5. That's the last playoff series Giannis had. That's the last playoff series when he had. And Middleton goes down in that series. He slips on a wet spot on the Fiserv Forum court, and the entire franchise ends up spiraling out of control because he's out for the rest of that year. And they go in the second round. They take on Boston. They had Game 6 back in Milwaukee with a 3-2 series lead. Bucks in 6, had a chance to close it out, had a lead in the fourth quarter, couldn't do it. Then you lose Game 7 in Boston. Boston ultimately makes the finals that year and loses to Steph Curry and the Warriors. But in my mind, if Middleton doesn't go down in that first round, they beat Boston in the second round. They make it to the finals, and they beat Golden State. Golden State had no answer defensively on the interior for Giannis, and the Celtics didn't have an interior presence like that, and ultimately that's why they lost that finals matchup. If Middleton doesn't go down, and he's never the same after that, and he was already progressing to his early 30s, but he's never the same after going down on that wet spot on the floor against the Bulls in Game 2, I think it was Game 2 of that series. And I think they win the title that year. I can't prove it, but I think they win the title that year. And then you would have gotten 2 championships in the Giannis era. And if it ends this week or it ends in the offseason, then we all feel good about it no matter what, but you would have felt even better. You would have felt like you didn't leave anything out there. And I do think they would have gotten their second title in 2022. But then Middleton, he's kind of hit or miss heading into that next year. He doesn't play the full year. They still get to 56 wins. They're still the 1 seed. And they make all the moves, and they bring in Dame and AG, and then eventually AG is fired, and they bring in Doc. But Middleton is never the same. He's never the same. He's never a 20-point-per-game scorer again. He doesn't play consistently, and that's ultimately where the team suffers. And Drew that year had to be the number 2 because Middleton couldn't be. And while we love Drew is a number 3. He's a number 4. He'll give you points, and he'll make the smart decisions. He'll play hard-nosed defense. But what we learned that year is he is not a true number 2 scoring threat in the NBA on a title team. And when he went to Boston, he was the 4th or 5th option there when they won the title the next year. But I think even in the Brandon, the emailers, alternate timeline that a lot of Bucks fans have discussed, I don't think they win the title in 23-24 if they just stick with it. And then at the end of that year, if you don't win the title that year, which I don't think they would have, if they don't win the title that year, then when you hit the offseason, in all likelihood, you're trading either Holiday or Middleton or both, and you're not getting Dame, you're getting other pieces, and how does that work out? We don't know. But when you look at that alternate timeline of what if we just would have done nothing after Jimmy Butler torched us in the 23 playoffs and we stick with it, I'll grant you there are probably more regular season wins. I'll even grant you there's a chance they win a playoff series or 2, and they weren't able to do that with Dame and Giannis the 2 years that he was here. So we might see more wins. We might see a playoff series win where we did not. But ultimately, I don't think there's a second title there for that core 4 with Bud as the coach. And ultimately, I think we're probably on the same timeline and the same path we are now. And don't forget, too, for those that lament firing Bud and saying we should have stuck with Bud, Bud came back with the Suns and he was terrible. I mean, Mike, let me see what the record was. Did he last 1 year in Phoenix? After a year or 2 off, he came back with the Suns, and he had Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. I mean, he had a lot of talent on those teams, and they didn't do anything. 1 year he lasted in Phoenix. So he took 2 years off, and then he came back with Phoenix, and they went 36-46 and missed the playoffs. So I guess there would be more mystery if Bud just would have stayed retired after that year and he had not coached anywhere else. But he came back a few years later with basically the same system and a very talented Suns team, and they finished 10 games under 500. So I think there could be more wins. I think there might have been a playoff series win or 2 in there, but I do not think ultimately we're in any different spot than we are now. I think ultimately we are 3 days away from the deadline in 2026 and wondering whether or not Giannis is going to stay. It's an interesting debate, though. The Middleton's body breaking down, that, to me, is the crux of where things started to spiral out of control. If Middleton doesn't hurt his knee, I think they win a second title. And then he's going to age, inevitably, but he ages more gracefully, probably, than he did having to battle with the knee injuries, and the other knee injuries, and the shin injuries, and all the other things that came with that. Now, another email from our buddy Chad in Sheboygan Falls said, John, of all the teams that Giannis could go to, if he does leave, where would you want to see him end up? So the 4 teams that seem to be the most in the mix here are New York, which I just don't see how that's going to work. I don't know how much truth there is to that's where Giannis wants to be. Like if you went up to Giannis and you said you can go anywhere in the NBA, where do you want to be? All rumors seem to indicate that he wants to be a New York Knick, but they don't have any draft capital, like none. So you have to work in a third team there. And then what are we getting back? Karl Anthony Towns? I mean, this can't be what we're doing. Please don't let this be what we're doing. You're getting back Karl Anthony Towns, Mikal Bridges maybe, and then you're going to have to loop in another team. The Knicks don't have any first-round picks. And then this, whatever trade this is, if it happens, the Bucks have to get at least 4 or 5 first-round picks. The Knicks don't have any of that. So I just don't see how that trade would work. So the Knicks are in the mix, apparently. The other teams that are in the mix, Miami, and they do have some first-round collateral, but I hate Miami. I would hate to see Giannis go to Miami. I would hate to see Giannis succeed in Miami. The other one is the Timberwolves. I would put that, of the 4 teams being most mentioned, I would say that's my number 2 spot for him. I like Ant Edwards. There is sort of a kinship between Minnesota and Milwaukee as 2 cold franchises, small market franchises that no one wants to seem to go there. But a lot like the Bucks did with Giannis, the Timberwolves draft this once-in-a-lifetime shooting guard, Anthony Edwards, Ant Edwards, and they've been able to build around him. I would like to see how Giannis and Ant Edwards work together. As a side note, and we're going to talk about my number 1 team that I'd like to see him go to if he's traded here in a second, I do wonder about Giannis and how natural these fits are. We thought the Dame trade, when Dame came here, we all thought, oh, there's no way this doesn't work out. Their games perfectly complement each other. Giannis can pick and roll. He can slash. He thrives at the rim. Dame will get free shots from beyond the arc. We thought that that was going to be, and they were to some extent, but we thought that was going to be an elite duo. So when you start talking about Giannis teaming up with Ant Edwards or Giannis teaming up with Steph Curry, a lot of folks are talking about those tandems the same way we did about Giannis and Dame. I'm not so sure these are all layup successes because the Giannis-Dame thing did not ultimately work out. But I wouldn't mind seeing Giannis and Edwards together. And again, I think there is sort of a kindred spirit there between Minnesota and Milwaukee. It's a Western Conference team. I don't mind seeing him go to the West. I'd prefer him to go to the West. So that would be my number 2. My number 1 team, if he is going to get traded, that I would like to see him go to is Golden State. And now look, Golden State had a dynasty there. They won 3 of the 4 in a row. They played Cleveland 4 years in a row. They won 3 of those 4. They had the unlikely title, which we just talked about in 22, where if Middleton doesn't get hurt, they probably don't get it. But they got it. So that's a late in Steph Curry's career title that I don't think they thought they were going to get 3 or 4 years removed from that run of 4 finals in a row. But I would like to see that. If Giannis has to play somewhere else, I would like to see the Steph Curry-Giannis combination. It also, again, like Minnesota, it gets him to the Western Conference. My guess is Golden State is able to extend him. And they do have the first-round pick collateral. Where those picks would end up, you would think they're going to win a bunch of games. So could it be a middle first round, a late first round? I don't know. They do control some other teams' picks, too, that have far worse records, so maybe that plays into it. It does sound like the package would be Jonathan Kuminga, who wants out of Golden State, who is only 23 years old. What is he averaging this year? And they thought he was going to get or be a perfect fit there. He's a good wing player, 6'7". The Bucks have not had a good wing player since Middleton's prime. He is averaging 12 points a game, 6 rebounds per game this year. He is not shooting the best, but he's only 23 years old, and he's been playing for Golden State for 5. So he was playing pretty good minutes and starting games as a 19-year-old. So it seems like if the Bucks were to swing a trade with Golden State, it would center on 23-year-old Jonathan Kuminga. It would center on 4 first-round picks that Golden State has control of. And then you would probably have to throw in either Jimmy Butler, who is hurt, I think, or Draymond Green. Now, Draymond Green... I don't think Draymond Green may refuse to show up to Milwaukee if he gets traded to Milwaukee. I do not see a guy like that wanting to go to a tanking team for the remainder of the year. And I do know Steph Curry, despite all of Draymond Green's both on the floor and off the floor stuff, Steph seems to love him and has fought for him to stay there. My guess is the trade would be, if it's just the Bucks and Golden State, my guess is the trade would be Giannis for Kuminga, Butler, and 4 first-round picks. And then my guess is, I think Butler's out the rest of the year. Is Jimmy Butler out the rest of the year? I think he is. Rest of the season. And then for the Bucks, yeah, he's out for the year. He's a torn ACL. So he's not even going to be back until middle of the year next year. So then from a Bucks perspective, you would get a young player with upside in Kuminga. You would get the 4 first-round picks. And then you rehab Jimmy Butler. He comes back in December maybe of next year or January, hopefully. Then he would play for 4 or 5 weeks. Then you could maybe trade him at the deadline for another first-round pick, and you could just continue to build up pick collateral. To me, I want that combo of all those options. I wouldn't mind seeing Steph and Giannis chase a title and see if Steph can get a late career title and see if Giannis can get his second ring. It's not a hateable franchise. Even though they won a bunch, it is odd how the Warriors are not really that hateable considering the amount of titles they won and how much they dominated there for a while. So I wouldn't hate that, and I think the package coming back makes sense. You get one young player with upside who is going to be a focal point for the Bucks then going forward. I mean, Kuminga would be the guy going forward, and I think that's what he wants. You get to rehab the veteran Butler. Maybe we see him play a handful of weeks in a Bucks jersey next year. Then you trade him for a pick in all likelihood. Then you get 4 first-round picks. You get another one for Butler, so 5 first-round picks. The trade compensation makes the most sense for me with that. And that is, I think, where I would prefer to see him go if he is to get traded by the deadline. We're going to have to check at the end of this podcast if a trade has been executed because it could happen at any minute. We're doing a lot of hypotheticals right now, and it could already be done. One more quick email on Giannis. An emailer, Scott in Milwaukee, said, John, does the team acquiring Giannis also have to acquire Thanasis and Alex Antetokounmpo? Now, that's a question. I think so. I think you have to throw Thanasis in there. I am going to be very curious if whatever team Giannis would end up with, I am curious to see if that franchise will be as accepting as signing all of Giannis's brothers and some second cousins and some friends of his to the front office. You know, I like Thanasis. I don't think it's a secret that Thanasis probably would not be on an NBA roster if it weren't for Giannis playing in Milwaukee. And Alex Antetokounmpo, who is in the G League right now at the Herd, he probably would not be on a franchise either. Kostas is playing in Europe. Otherwise, he'd probably be on the Bucks roster too. And there's the long-lost brother who never left Africa. Maybe we sign him too. I think Thanasis has to be a part of this deal, right? And then they'll probably not re-sign him, whatever place he would go, Golden State, Minnesota, New York, whatever. I don't think they'd bring Thanasis back after this year, but it feels like that's going to have to be included. Could you imagine if it's not and Thanasis has to ride out the rest of the year in Milwaukee with a tanking Bucks team and Giannis is elsewhere? That's going to have a really weird feel to it. Yeah, Scott, I think that's probably true. So put that on the ledger. Whatever the deal to be done is, it's going to be Giannis and Thanasis for whatever's coming back. And honestly, that may alter the structure of the deal because you have to match salary to some extent, and Thanasis is making a salary. He is not on a per diem here. He is making, I think, $1 million or $1.5 million this year. And if he's included in the trade, you've got to make that work. The ledger has to be balanced for these trades to work. That's a good email, too. I had not really thought about that, but probably. Now, here's an email from our friend. Let's shift gears to the Packers, who, by the way, in a Friday news dump, which was weird, the Packers officially announced that Goody, Russ Ball, and LaFleur all signed contract extensions. They dropped that at 4 o'clock on their social medias on Friday, which is normally where you dump news you don't want people to find out. That was an odd way to handle that. I still don't know if we're going to get a press conference or if Ed Policy is going to do a Q&A with the Packer beat reporters. You would think he'd want to. Every sit-down he's done so far has been so curated, and not a knock against Larry McCarron. Most of them have been Larry McCarron. We all love Larry McCarron. But, you know, he had the questions going in. He had time to prepare. I would like to see Ed Policy, not that he can't handle himself. I'm sure he can. But I'd like to see Ed Policy conduct a press conference, talk about the extensions, talk about the reason these guys got extensions, talk about why Rich Bisaccia still has a job. I want all of these things addressed. And I don't know if that's going to happen. The fact that they do a 4 o'clock news dump on Friday kind of makes me think they're not going to do a press conference anytime soon. And that may be until May when OTAs start that he actually does one. But that was news on Friday. So all 3 of those guys, as expected, got contract extensions. We don't know how long they are. We don't know how much money is involved. Hey, how about Matt LaFleur's brother, Mike, too? If you say fire LaFleur now, you're going to have to specify. Mike LaFleur, at 38 years old, is now the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals. And we also got the Jimmy Leonard saga ended. He is now the defensive coordinator in Buffalo. So he moves on from Denver and is now the DC with the Bills. So that was news, too. All right, so 2 more emails. One from Kurt in Plymouth. He said, John, you talk all the time about the Packer History Twitter page. If you had to pick one non-Super Bowl season that you enjoyed the most, what season would it be? So, I guess I didn't even consider it. I guess since he said non-Super Bowl season, I'm guessing he means non-Super Bowl championship season. So I suppose if it's just non-Super Bowl season, that 97-98 would be out too because they made the Super Bowl. So outside of the Super Bowl 31 championship and the Super Bowl 45 championship, what was my favorite year to watch the Packers? So I thought about this a few weeks ago, and we just never got to it. I landed on 3 seasons that would be in the running for me. Number 1 would be the 1995 season, the season before they won Super Bowl 31. The other options would be the 2007 season, that was Favre's last year in Green Bay, and the 2016 run-the-table year, which ended in infamy in Atlanta, but that was primarily because the team had run out of gas, the defense was on 3rd and 4th stringers, Ladarius Gunter was trying to defend prime Julio Jones in that game, what a debacle. But that was another one where it looked like the season was meandering and they came back to life and Rodgers had that epic quote and then they just couldn't lose up until the NFC title game. Those, to me, when I thought about in my lifetime, non-Super Bowl championship seasons that I enjoyed the most, those were the 3 I came up with, 1995, 2007, and 2016. And I think where I land ultimately of those 3 is my favorite. 95 I love for a lot of reasons. First of all, I was 11 years old, 12 years old, 11 years old as that was going on, or 10 years old when that season started. And everything's better when you're a kid, right? Everything's better. That's why we all wistfully look back to the past and say, God, everything was so much better back in the day. Things were so much better. Well, yeah, you were a kid. Everything was better when you were a kid. You didn't have any responsibilities, really. You were playing with your friends and collecting baseball or doing whatever you do. Yeah, a lot of things were better back in the day. So that is a part of it. And I just remember in that era, watched every game with the family. So many good memories of Packers Sundays as they're on the rise and they're winning games. And there's this optimism about the franchise again for a long time. And watching the games with my family, my mom and my dad, and high-fiving my dad, and my sister reading a book or doing something else entirely, but still in the room and kind of a part of it. But like we talked about, passive-aggressively tolerating it. But I have just such great memories of that era, the 93, 94, 95 era, as the team is on the rise. And that was the year they ultimately beat the Niners in the divisional round, the defending champions. Nobody saw that coming. That was sort of a moment where we felt, oh, okay, this team is taking a step. And they lose to the Cowboys in the NFC Championship game for what felt like at the time the 43rd time in a row. But it just felt like then, that next season, they were on the cover of SI. That was their time to take the final step forward. That 95 year, which we played clips of, that was the year they won their first division championship, and we went to Yonkers and got the most basic title hats of all time on Christmas Eve. There are so many good memories of being a kid and getting a Packers starter jacket that I love about that era. And the 2016 one was fun, too, especially on the air and working in radio at that point and getting to play the run-the-table clips. They were 4-6, I think, and then they just got on this heater after Rodgers said, I think we can run the table. I really think we can. That was a lot of fun up until the NFC title game. Where I land, though, as my favorite non-Super Bowl season would be the 2007 season. And I know we've said this in the past, some of the best sports years for any team, whether you're rooting baseball, football, basketball, whatever. The best years are the years where you don't expect anything, and expectations are low, and the team just goes way beyond what you thought they could. Now, in 2007, that was year 2 of McCarthy. They had come off of an 8-8 year, so 05 was the worst year I've ever watched, and I've lived a privileged Packer football life. They went 4-12 that year. That was the Sam Congato year. They come back in 06. They signed Woodson in 06, and they started that year 4-8. But they did win their last 4 games in 06, and they finished 500. So there was a little bit of a green arrow up next to them as they head into 2007. Even with that, even with the 4-game winning streak and finishing that year at 500, we did not expect what happened in 2007. Now, the reason I select this is not just the year they had. It also kind of coincides with some personal stuff for me. I had just gotten a job in radio. Fall of 2006 was my first time working at WHBL. So that year then, the summer of 07 into the beginning of 07 was my first full year working at B93 and HBL and making new friends here and meeting my eventual wife, Lindsay, who worked in radio. That's a little fun fact that I'm not sure everybody knows. One day we'll have her on the podcast and tell you that story. But we had just met, and we were kind of starting to date, and I this is going to be a dumb reason, but this is another reason I remember that year fondly. I, for a brief period, moved in with one of my better friends, Paul, and we moved into an apartment, or he was in an apartment, I moved in with him on the north side of Sheboygan, and one of the first things we did was went to Best Buy, and I opened a Best Buy credit card here in Sheboygan, and I purchased a Samsung Aquos 42-inch HD TV 1080p with 60 frame refresh rate. And at that time, I knew what all of that meant. And I can't tell you, if you didn't live in that era, I can't tell you how startling it was to watch sports going from standard def to high def. Like, I remember we got that gigantic TV, which weighed about 1,000 pounds. We got that TV back to the apartment, and we would flip on our Charter remote. We would flip on ESPN, we'd turn on a game, and we would just jump between standard def and high def just because we were so amazed at how crystal clear the high def broadcast looked. Like, it had that kind of cachet to us that we would just do that for minutes at a time. My God, look at how good this basketball game looks. So watching all of the games that year in HD, and being what I was 23 years old and just getting into my career and just meeting the most important person in my life and watching these games in high def and going out with friends and celebrate. I mean, it was just that age for me and that era were so much fun. And they win 13 games, and Favre is humming. And it looked like Favre had just fallen off, and this was going to be the end. We thought he was going to retire at the end of the 4-12 season, and we thought he was going to retire at the end of 06. And he comes back, and they've got all these young receivers now, Jones and Jennings surrounding him, and they're going 4 and 5 wide, which, as we discussed with Mike McCarthy in that era, that was very inventive and innovative in that era. And they were slinging it, and Favre looked like he was 30 years old again, throwing a bunch of touchdowns, celebrating. He broke records that year. And yeah, they run it all the way to the title game, and it's absolute heartbreak in the title game in the frigid temperatures against the Giants, and Coughlin's cheeks fell off his face, and Favre throws that crippling interception when you were gifted overtime, and it ends terribly. It ends in tragedy. But that's the question. The question is your favorite non-Super Bowl year. And when I think back to that age of my life, and moving out and getting a job and meeting a girl and getting this, spending $3,000. That's what it was. It was $3,000. That Sharp Aquos TV was $3,000 goddamn dollars in 2007. I paid it off $30 at a time. And it just is such a fun season that I remember, and just, oh my God, they're winning, and we can't believe that was the Favre walk-off to Jennings on Monday Night Football against the Broncos, and they won in all these kind of fun ways. And they win 13 games, and the Cowboys lose, and you get the NFC Championship game at Lambeau, and just a lot of fun. I think we went to a game that year, too. So I think that's where I land. Of those three, those are the three that I thought about, 95, 07, 2016. And I think that's where I land. Now, the early LaFleur years, 2019 was kind of an unexpected year, right? In his first year where they make the NFC title game and get beat down by the Niners. 2021, the pandemic year, was weird. It was a fun year because they put up so many points and they were the 1 seed, but that ends in heartbreak too. I think I just land on 2007 as my favorite non-Super Bowl year. The culmination of Favre in Green Bay. A lot of stuff going on in my life. HD, stunning HD. That's where I land. But that's a good email. I thought about that one for a while. We just never quite got to it. Kurt in Plymouth. And now we end with this email where I get to get my George Costanza on. So we've got a lifestyle question. We have not had one of these on the email yet. So this is from, I don't even know if I should say his name. I'm going to say his name, Brett. We're not going to say where he works. It's tagged on the email. Brett in Sheboygan. Brett said, hey, John, been listening to you on the morning show for many years. Jumped into the podcast about 6 months ago. Thank you. Have you left a rating? Could you leave a rating before I give you this advice? 6 months ago. He said, you've talked on the air before about losing your hair. After examining some pictures from the holidays, the reality is setting in for me. My hairline is officially retreating. I'm not laughing at you. I'm just remembering the same stuff happening to me, not at this guy's age. So he said, the reality is setting in for me. My hairline is officially retreating. I just turned 31 in fall, any advice for me? So as I'm reading this email, I am remembering the times where I would look at pictures and say, uh-oh, this isn't good. And I think I've said either on the podcast or on the air, foolishly early in my life, I believed dumbly that the hair loss gene came from your mom's side, right? That's the old wives' tale. You get the hair loss gene on your mom's side. And my grandpa on my mom's side had a thick, luscious head of hair up until the day he died. And I thought that's what I was getting. Now, what should have been the canary in the coal mine for me is that my grandpa and my mom's hair is black. And my dad's hair and his hair on his side of the family from his mom is red. So the fact that I ended up with red hair should have told me that maybe this mom's side hair gene thing isn't holding a ton of weight. But I remember seeing pictures and thinking the same thing Brett did of, oh, you kind of know. I mean, there's kind of some thoughts when you look in the mirror, but it isn't until you see those first side profile pictures where you think, oh boy, look at a big gulp. Now, there are a couple of pieces of information, and we'll see if Brett will follow up. There are a couple of pieces of information I would like from Brett before I render a final verdict here, even though I think my advice ultimately ends up in the same spot. Number one for Brett that I need to know is, are you married? Or are you looking? Do you have a fiance? Are you a longtime partner? Where are you in your relationship status? Because this does change my advice. If you are settled into a long-term relationship and the other person in that relationship does not care that much anymore about the hairline, then that makes things a little easier. If you are out there, I'm out there, Jerry. If you're out there at 31 years old, it does limit your pool. I hate to say it, but it is going to shrink your pool. That's the harsh reality. There are some people out there that do not care about somebody else's hairline. God bless them. There are some people that actually think the bald look is good. It's not a huge amount of people, but there are those people. But there are some people that they are going to rule you out based on a receding hairline. So I would like to have that piece of information. The other piece of information I need from Brett is, can you grow a beard? Because that also changes the dynamic. Luckily, I am able to grow a beard. Now, what is the difference between the 3 inches from my beard to the top of my head, that the top of my head can't grow hair, but the side of my face can? Like, why can't we just make this all work? What is it about the hair follicles on the top of the head that doesn't translate to 3 inches down to my cheeks and to my chin and to my shoulders and to my back? Why are all of those places sprouting hair, and the top of my head is the only place that can't get it done? But if you can grow a beard, the beard bald look is not terrible. And I think that's a good lean. That's a good crutch that I've had for many years. Now, I've had a beard since college. I have let it get a little thicker and longer as the years have gone by. And it's not a bad combo. In fact, I had somebody ask me not long ago if I had a choice, because I'm such a beard, that's like my identifying characteristic now. If I had a choice between I could grow my hair back and I couldn't have a beard, I couldn't grow a beard at all, would I take that, or would I stick with the beard and shaved head look? And I think ultimately now, because I'm so used to it, now if you would have asked me at Brett's age at 31 or in my mid-20s when I noticed this was becoming a problem, I think then I take the hair no beard combo. But now, this has been such a part of my look in my life, and there is kind of a convenience to just being able to zip your head and be done with it. And you do have to kind of take care of the beard, but what would I pick there? Beard, bald, or hair, no beard? I think I'm on beard, bald now. But my answer would probably change depending on the age you asked me that question. So I need that information too. Those are 2 tidbits I'd like to know. Can you grow a beard? Is it a good beard? Can you grow a beard? And are we single, or are we comfortably in a relationship? Now, ultimately, I think I land in the same space at the end of the day. First of all, I do feel, Brett, if you are just noticing that the hair is going away now, which, by the way, congrats to making it to 31. Like I said, I noticed this, I think it was college graduation pictures when I was 23, and pictures from that day, that was the first time where I saw a side profile of my head and thought, oh, shit, this is not good. I do, from what I've read, and this is all conjecture, but from what I've read, the options of pills now to maintain the hairline that you have, not necessarily to grow all of your hair back, but to keep you where you are. And if you're just noticing it, that's another side note that you should know. Now, when you start to lose your hair as a guy, You think everybody notices it. Not everybody notices it. You know, if the old axiom is true that nobody is paying as close of attention to you as you are, other people are wrapped up in their own stuff, in their own problems, in their own head. They're not noticing slight changes to your hairline the way that you are. So if you are just noticing that your hair is starting to go back, I do think the pill options now are a lot better, like 4Hims. There's a bunch of them out there. And again, I'm not sure they're going to regrow what you've lost, but I think that they will keep you where you're at. And if you're just noticing it now, and you can take a pill a day or whatever, I don't even know what the regimen is. If you can take a pill or two a day and keep yourself reasonable with where you're at, then I think you're in a pretty good spot. So that would be my first suggestion, is to reach out to those companies or find real reviews or real testimonials. And I do think the pill options, especially the 4Hims stuff from what I've read, is better. Now, I'm so far gone, 4Hims isn't doing anything for me. It's all gone. So I would have needed 4Hims to exist 17 years ago. When I started losing my hair, the only options were Propecia, I think, was the pill, and that was like hit or miss. And then you had Rogaine, and you had Rogaine foam. And I did do a 6-month run on Rogaine foam, and it did squadoosh for me. In fact, I lost more hair. My hair just said, nope, we don't want any part of this. I did try that, where after a shower, you had to spray that foam on the back of your head and rub it in there. And then at some point, you were supposed to regrow hair in the next 4 to 5, 6 months. That never happened for me. So that would be my first suggestion, is I think the options now are legitimately better than they were. You can also fly to Turkey and get a hair transplant. I've seen that happen too. But with some success, with a lot of success, actually. Take a trip to Turkey. But I would explore that because I think those options are good. But other than that, the advice I would give to you is, if you don't want to do the pill thing and you're just kind of resigned to this is going to be something you're dealing with over the next few years, I guess what I would say to you is, once it gets to a point where everybody notices that you're fighting it, this is the old Macho Man thing that we throw out there from time to time. I wish I could find the audio of this quote. I can't. The old Macho Man quote is, you may not like it, but accept it. So if you're not going to go through the transplant route or the 4Hims pills or whatever, and you just know, okay, this is the direction we're headed, once it becomes really noticeable, just zip it. Because it is the most freeing thing that you can do when you've got the hairline going away. And I regret that I fought it for so long, and I did. So it's easy for me to say from here, from where I'm at now, to say to you, you may not like it, but accept it. Keep in mind, I fought this thing for probably 6 or 7 years. And I did everything you could possibly do. I mean, you tried a little comb over. Now, I started losing it from the front before I lost the back. Some people go the opposite way. Sometimes it happens both at the same time. But I did not start to lose hair on my crown until maybe like even 5 or 6 years ago. And that just was a part of the zip process. But I had a receding hairline. So I would have decent hair in the back. So I'd try to just like push that forward and then put a bunch of hairspray on there. And then I lived in fear. Now, I don't know if you're a hat guy or not, but I lived in fear in that era when I was still trying to cover it from front to back. I lived in fear of having to go somewhere where you couldn't wear a hat, and I'd push it forward and I'd use a ton of hairspray. But if there was a stiff breeze, like I was petrified of a stiff breeze. I was horrified of a wind gust. Because even with the hairspray, once it gets to a point, the hair is going to flip up like David Spade and Tommy Boy. So I did that for a long time, too. I'll never forget, it was one of my good buddies, Eddie. He was the program director at B93. He got married in 2016, I think, or 2015. It was a New Year's Eve wedding at Blue Harbor. And I was in that era of still, all right, let's push what we can forward and hairspray it. It's a wedding. You can't wear a hat at a wedding. And I had just gotten to a point where I was sick of doing that. And I knew people noticed it anyway, so what was the point of doing this? So on my way home from work that day, I stopped at a Target. I bought a wall clippers, and I just zipped it. And that was it. And that was the first time I did it, and I've done it the whole time since. I think I started on a 1 or a 2 setting, and now I'm to a point where I don't even have a setting on it. I just zip it as tight as I can. But I remember that night before we went to the wedding, I was in the bathroom crying. And I said, I'm done. I'm done doing this. This is it. I'm waving the white flag. I had been with Lindsay at that point for, 10 plus years. She didn't care. So that's it. I waved the white flag and I zipped it and I never looked back. You may not like it, but accept it. It took me a long way to get there, but that would be my advice. If you're not going to explore the pill route or trying to save what you have, that would be my advice to Brett in Sheboygan. Well, I'm glad that people are seeking my counsel. I'm like, this is like the Costanza. This is like the episode where Elaine's boyfriend notices he's losing his hair.
You would be the best person I could talk to.
Yep. Classic horseshoe pattern. I've seen a lot of this.
Oh, God.
No, Kurt, wrong attitude. You should be happy now.
Happy? Why should I be happy?
You've still got pretty good coverage. Once the enemy advances beyond this perimeter, then you won't be Kurt anymore.
What will I be?
Oh, God.
How long do I have?
14 months. Maybe 10.
Is there anything I can do?
Yes. Live, damn it! Live! Every precious moment as if this was the last year of your life. Because in many ways, it is.
B93. I'm happy we can roll that in. I mean, we use the email primarily for sports-related questions, but if you have any lifestyle questions, relationship, I can do my best. I can do my best to help you. That one is a particular area of expertise, as clearly Brett knows, having listened to the morning show for many years, and we have talked about that a little bit on the air. So that is my hair loss advice. All right, that'll do it for us here on your Monday. I kind of enjoyed the mailbag episode. We will come back on Friday. It will be Prop Bet Friday, Super Bowl prop bets, as we head into Super Bowl 60 weekend. Any Packer news, and then obviously the biggest tidbit we'll have on Friday. By Friday morning when we click record, either Giannis is still a Buck or the era is over. And if the era is over, we're going to have a lot to harvest there too. Have a happy, safe work week. We'll chat with you then.